Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where Hollywood once again tried to blame streaming for their own failure at the box office. This time, Universal's decision for a day-and-date release on Peacock for Halloween Ends. And that's why it came in more than 10 million below projections. How about the movie wasn't very good? I think that's more likely. Halloween Kills, for instance, also came out day and date on Peacock, yet still managed to open close to 50 million more when it was more like pandemic-y out there, right? I don't know if the pandemic's ever going to end at this point, totally. But, people were a little bit more nervous to go to the theaters when that film was released, and yet it still did better. So I think what you're really seeing here is a fandom falling out of love with a franchise. Oh, it's almost poetic. There's more, of course, going on, but I think that's like one of the main points. And yes, you might be like, but Grace, didn't you tweet out just the other day that you personally enjoyed Halloween Ends? I did tweet that out. But I'm not a slasher Michael Myers fan. I had a tough time sitting through the last two. Clearly, the movie didn't appeal to its target demographic, the group that made this franchise a big deal in the first place. And that's something we talk about all the time. It's great to bring in new fans like myself for me to go, hey, I actually liked this one, but you got to retain the original fans for it to work. And Halloween Ends is the latest franchise to make that mistake. What will the trade say this coming weekend, when the latest DC movie hits theaters? I think some DC fans will defend it out of loyalty to the brand, but I think some other DC fans like myself will take issue with the unnecessary changes made to the source material. You can change it if it's clever. Don't just change it for the sake of change or for talent. Thanks to a horrendous Rotten Tomatoes score out of the gate, I suspect the score will end up somewhere in the 40s by the end of the day. Because, it's only got like under 100 reviews right now, and it'll end up with somewhere like 300 to 400 reviews, and ultimately probably even more. So I think it'll end somewhere in the 40s. And some of you are like, Rotten Tomatoes never gives DC a fair shake. But that's not true. A number of recent DC movies have had fresh RT scores. In fact, some of them have had very good RT scores. Anyway, thanks to this stinker of a Rotten Tomatoes score, Hollywood has already downgraded their projections for Black Adam to a 60 million debut, and they're hiding it behind a 135 million worldwide debut. Read the fine print. So that would be on par with Dwayne Johnson's biggest opening to date, Hobbs and Shaw. That film, by the way, made a whopping 77% of its box office, overall from overseas. Wow, yikes, that's very unusual for any movie. Typically, a big blockbuster will have about 60 or so % from overseas box office. And a really strong film like, Black Panther or Top Gun Maverick, those will be like more of an even 50-50 split. But anyway, Hobbs and Shaw really appealed to the overseas market. And I could see something similar happening with Black Adam. But is 760 enough to keep Dwayne Johnson's DC dreams alive? Maybe. It's tough to tell. That's about where the Batman came in, and they're still talking to Matt Reeves over there. He's actually making lots of plans. But that 770 for the Batman didn't exactly light a fire under Warner Brothers Discovery to get things going. The Reeves-verse is developing quite slowly. They're like, oh yeah, we have so much planned. Look at all this stuff we're going to do. And you're like, when? And they're like, I don't know. The only thing that's moving along right now is the Penguin show. But I think the Batman 2 should happen. But yeah, they're not highly motivated by that box office. And they're still talking to Dwayne Johnson and James Gunn. They're not like, this is the way. To borrow from another franchise. They're like, maybe it's the way. We don't know. All right, and by the way, that's assuming the Black Adam opens on par with Hobbs and Shaw. I could see it opening a little lower, to be honest with you. Shazam opened to 53 million, and that's a similar character. Well, supposed to be, except Dwayne Johnson's like, I don't know who that is, even though he produces the movie. But anyway, some recent DC openings have been low. But was that because of the quality of the film, or due to the pandemic, or that they opened day and date on HBO Max? Speaking of streaming strategies, we still don't really have a good read on what's going on with DC right now because of the pandemic. Well, we're about to find out, though. But anyway, an opening with a 5 in front of it would mirror Dwayne Johnson's last Jumanji movie. And the truth is, outside of the Fast and Furious movies, which he quit over a feud with Vin Diesel, The Rock's movies don't typically open that big stateside. So we'll see what happens this weekend. It's going to be real interesting. I'm sorry that a couple of movie maths have been delayed, but I'm back, baby, full time. And that one's going to go up and the rest of the year, except for Christmas and New Year's, which are Sundays. So those movie maths will go up the day after, understandably. And I have to include those grosses. All right, so anyway, yes, Hollywood has to grapple, I think, with the fact that franchises are no longer easy money, where a fan base shows up no matter how bad the movie is. Remember when that used to be a thing? Well, no more, because fans are smarter these days. They're more aware of why a movie stinks. And also they can talk more. Before you might be like, well, maybe it's just me who hates this movie. And now you go on the Twitters and the Facebook and you're like, wow, everybody thinks it's crap. All right, so anyway, there's also more competition for attention from other franchises, and also thanks to multiple streaming services, which have exponentially expanded the reach of those other franchises, and also just gives audiences more options overall. Remember how there used to be so few options? If you wanted to be entertained over the weekend, usually nothing aired on television, and then there were just a couple of channels. And then there was like one movie. And if you wanted to be entertained for the weekend, you had to go see the new movie of the weekend. But that's simply no longer the case, especially when on top of all the choices out there, the pandemic has trained a large chunk of audiences to not only be patient enough to wait for movies to hit digital or even worse, no extra cost streaming much further down the line, but also a number of people at this point prefer the home viewing experience than the multiplex. That's on theaters, by the way. With all their complaining about losing ground to streaming and the home theater experience, they've done very little to entice moviegoers to return and, improve the moviegoing experience, right? Are you under fire? Maybe you should fight back. No, we're just going to complain. I also think the Paramount Smile is taking away a lot of Halloween Ends customer base. A competing horror movie, a new one, a totally new brand, so it's full of surprises, and it's a sensation. Its strong week-to-week holds prove that word of mouth is getting a lot of people to check it out. Word of mouth and I think press. People are like, maybe I should see Smile. When did you see Smile? Did you see it right away? Were you late to the party or are you waiting? Both of these movies, though, speaking of waiting, I think, they have 2 weeks to go until Halloween, and I think they should do steady business until then. And hey, maybe Halloween Ends really helped Peacock. But who knows? We'll never know, because Peacock isn't included on Nielsen. Get on Nielsen. It's ridiculous. They might release a headline, but they haven't yet, and it's been a couple of days. Where did you watch Halloween Ends? I saw it, but I watched it in a movie theater. I, in fact, had to travel this weekend for family reasons, and I went to the Cinemark North Hills in Pittsburgh, shout out, on a Monday afternoon. And let me tell you, I had a fabulous time. Wow, I can see why some of you are like, I don't understand your horrible New York City experiences, Grace. Well, now I understand you. And it was just absolute delight. My theater was new and clean, my fellow moviegoers an absolute delight, and I even played some arcade games afterwards. That was a great movie-going experience. Wow! As for the rest of the top 10, I'm thrilled to see The Woman King continue to hold strong as more and more people give the movie a chance. Come on, The Woman King! I'm rooting for you. I really want to see this as an Oscar contender. But speaking of the awards season, Amsterdam fell almost 60% in its second weekend after a weak start to begin with. This year's Oscar season so far is looking pretty bleak. I hope that we have some strong contenders emerge. And then Bros, in its third week at the box office, fell below $1 million for the entire weekend and is already out on digital. We'll touch on that when we get to iTunes. Hollywood, though, needs to figure out what makes a movie seem theater-worthy, as nowadays I hear a lot of people saying that a movie looks like a streaming movie. They're like, I'd like to see that, but it doesn't look like I should pay to see it in theaters. What do you think makes the difference between a movie being worth seeing in theaters or one that looks like it's meant to stream? Because even some movies with huge talent, you're like, that's a streaming movie. That's one other thing. When talent starts going to the streaming services, it also starts to, hurt the line between them, where you're like, you don't have that Pavlovian response anymore of being like, that's a movie because look who's in it. You're like, I see big stars all the time on streaming for no extra cost. I can wait. Over on streaming, for mid-September, The Rings of Power, with its 4th episode, continues to drop. It's still okay, but again, it's not worth the money that Amazon paid for it if this is going to be its performance. It's now almost tied with House of the Dragon, but don't forget, that's not all House of the Dragon's viewership, as it airs primarily on HBO. What's the split? Who knows? Because Warner Brothers Discovery doesn't tell us. Cobra Kai, though, in its second week for its season 5, easily led the overall chart with more than double the viewership of the runner-up, Rings of Power. Sure, it's 50 episodes to 4, but still, it's clear there's nothing else out right now on streaming that's super hot, right? And only one movie, by the way, could even make the overall chart at the very bottom. Woo! I think maybe if you combine House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones, they kind of did a rebranding there, so, they're considered two separate entities by Nielsen. If you combine them into one, and you had both HBO and HBO Max numbers on here, maybe that would also be a pretty hot title. So, that's like an old school service like HBO trying to compete in the new streaming arena. And they've hobbled themselves because of the way they're set up in their old deals. All right, I hope that Warner Brothers Discovery or whoever takes over the company can fix that. Streamline that baby. All right, with originals, The Crown is doing quite well as people remember the Queen upon her passing, and it's likely the upcoming season 5 could be supercharged in terms of interest, and also because Elizabeth Debicki is Diana. It's uncanny, although I really like Dominic West, but he is a horrible Charles. Anyway, trailer for that drops tomorrow. And shockingly, She-Hulk has actually lost ground as the show progresses, with episode 5 just barely staying in the top 10 after having climbed up a bit in the last few weeks. All that progress lost. The movie chart, though, is just depressing. As I told you, only one could even make the overall. These viewership numbers are so bad, proving that for the most part, people prefer the 8 to 10 hour movies of streaming shows. Over on Netflix for just last week, Mila Kunis has a nice win with her new movie, although even the inappropriate nature of Blonde can't seem to entice viewers, with the Ana de Armas movie falling to a weak 4th place in just its second week on the streaming service. New movie, Mr. Harrigan's Phone, based on a Stephen King story, might not have had anybody talking, but they tuned in, and it has an okay debut in second place, although those numbers aren't very strong. But it's a nice entry on Jaden Martell's resume, instead of it actually being a big property. Jaden Martell, he changed his name. He's from It, remember him? Talk about changing your branding. But, I like him a lot, but I think, he's not quite making it as a star just yet. But maybe this is all part of his plan, to lay low, hit puberty fully, and then reemerge as an adult actor. He could do it. Because, sometimes it's hard for child actors to transition. Anyway, with shows, now here's a superstar, Dahmer. Wow, and I'm excited to see it hit the Nielsen charts probably next week or so and obliterate them. Wow, Dahmer is now Netflix's second most popular English language show ever after Stranger Things. If Evan Peters' agent can't get him something big off of this, Evan Peters needs a new agent. It's incredible. Meanwhile, The Midnight Club is a real misfire for Mike Flanagan, who actually went on Twitter asking fans if they could easily find the show on Netflix's interface. It's like, do you see it? Is it there? Can you find it? I mean, it seems, by the way, that those that did find it did not care for it, so I don't think it would have mattered if it was more accessible on the interface. It's Mike Flanagan's first tipped-over popcorn bucket for one of his Netflix shows. Then over on iTunes, Bullet Train is now available to rent for just $6 and is back to number 1. Well, sure enough, Universal rushed Bros out to digital, where it's at number 3. That's pretty good, and it's even at a high price point to purchase or rent. We'll see if it can stay in the top 10 for a couple of weeks. That would be ideal, as many of you said you thought it did look like a streaming movie and you were going to wait. So have you gotten it on digital, or are you waiting to stream it for no extra cost on Peacock? All right, so finally, as for this coming week, yes, after years of hype from Dwayne Johnson, years, we will finally see how Black Adam performs at the box office. Plus, Clooney and Roberts reunite for Ticket to Paradise, which I have to say, looks like a streaming movie. It looks like a blander White Lotus, quite frankly. Also, awards contender, the Banshees of Inisherin, speaking of Colin Farrell, opens in limited release. On streaming, Battle of the Super Sons hit digital yesterday. Movie Math is late this week, so it's Wednesday. So yesterday that hit wherever you can purchase digital movies. And The School for Good and Evil debuted on Netflix today. That's from Paul Feig, trying to revive his career post-Ghostbusters, and I don't see that happening. Then on Friday, Apple TV has a new movie, Raymond and Ray, starring Ewan McGregor and Ethan Hawke. Oh my goodness, how have we not heard about this until now? The Rotten Tomatoes score is not good, but I'm still intrigued because I like both those actors so much. And Apple TV, I have to tell you, has a pretty good track record in my opinion. As for series, another Ryan Murphy, he is a machine. He is a factory. Intentionally so. He has another season of American Horror Story starting tonight on FX. Tomorrow, Inside Amy Schumer returns, now on Paramount Plus. And then on Friday, Eugenio Derbez, who I hope is feeling better, his Acapulco gets a second season on Apple TV. Zoe Saldana has a new romance series on Netflix set in Italy. Maybe it'll hopefully be like, what is that? That's Emily in Paris. Maybe she's hoping to be like an Emily in Paris type show. And then Chloe Grace Moretz, bless her heart, she keeps trying. She has a new series on Prime Video from Westworld's Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan, which might mean it's very compelling, but deep down, truly awful. I mean, I like Westworld, although I thought the last season started strong, ended horrible. Again, I was like, this is just garbledy-gook. And then that movie they made with Hugh Jackman was so bad. So bad. Wow. But anyway, this will be a weekly release, so Prime Video must feel pretty good about it. Is it any good? Is it any good? Well, the review embargo lifts tomorrow, the day before release, so look for that RT score. I got the screeners, and I didn't even bother to watch it because I'm sorry to say, I don't think anybody associated with this is that hot right now. All right, so that's this week's movie math, although I'm willing to be pleasantly surprised when the show debuts. All right, so that's this week's movie. You can always turn things around. You can always turn things around if you can convince somebody to give you a 50 billionth chance. And in the world of streaming, it's easier to get those additional chances if you have any name at all, if you can be at any kind of draw. All right, so that's this week's movie math. What do you think of Halloween Ends' box office? What are your expectations for Black Adam? And are you still beholden to your favorite franchises? What do you think of the current landscape and the way audiences behave? Plus, what have you been watching and what do you plan to watch? Share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.